It's a great
I'm
restaurant.
all about new restaurants.
A little Canada room, 35.
Same shoes for the second day.
But I am a creature of habit.
Kind of a small press
You want us?
Come on, folks. Misery loves company. Come on. I'm not. Come on, Mr. Speaker. We'll hide you behind the jeans behind the podium if you want. Yeah.
We gotta buy the speaker a tie.
It's the house.
Christmas
This is the
coming.
house attire, right?
Christmas is coming. Let's buy the speaker a tie.
Well, I think if the Senate moves that you can drink water on the floor, then that would behoove
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
come
hard
on.
for us. That's like asking us to give our wigs up.
Even the U.S. Senate, you can drink water or milk on the floor.
On the floor?
On the floor, water or milk.
Not even
co-
pregnant women can
not
drink
coffee,
water
no.
on the floor of the Minnesota Senate.
Kind of tough. Very tough.
We're deep in tradition. Deep in tradition.
That's fine.
All right. Well,
People get a kick out of it.
we had a very productive meeting. We don't have an agreement or a deal on it, but we've outlined the parameters of the three pieces: the premium relief for people with the health care, and the tax bill, and the transportation. I'm sorry, the bonding bill, which includes transportation. We've got three groups. We'll be working on those beginning on Monday. The details, particularly of the bonding and the tax, and we're waiting to get from the House and Senate Republican caucuses what they want to do in addition to the premium relief that I proposed to see where we can go from there. So we won't know until we get those kind of responses. We set next Wednesday as the deadline for that, so that we could know where we stand, know what we agree on, know what we still don't agree on. And again, everything moving forward is conditional on being able to resolve those details. And we've seen in the past with discussions about special sessions that the details are determinative and not always favorable. But we'll see what happens this time, and we'll see where we go from there. Mr. Speaker, do you want to?
Sure. I agree with the governor. I think I said to the group right at the end here, I've been in the room when the deal happens, and I feel like I can see it. I don't think we're quite there yet, but as the governor has said, the devil sometimes is in the details. So I think our caucus is committed to providing some relief for folks that are affected by the spike in rates in the individual marketplace. We also have talked about the bonding bill and the tax bill. I think in concept we all agree if we do a special session, we'll do all of those things. I think it might have been a little optimistic for me to say that I thought we would get this wrapped up today. It does take a little bit of time for the numbers that we saw in the forecast this afternoon or this morning to sink in and figure out how all of these pieces fit into that, not only now but in the tails in the next biennium. So I think we want to leave ourselves some flexibility as well. As much as we can for setting a budget for next year, but I think we're close. I think we can see an agreement that would help out Minnesotans with the premium relief, and also be able to accomplish the tax bill and the bonding bill that I think many Minnesotans thought were important.
Well, I don't have a lot to add. I think we have been kind of holding our breath, waiting for today's forecast to see if this was even going to be possible to try and kind of resurrect the end of session and accomplish the bonding bill and a very good bipartisan tax bill that had overwhelming bipartisan support with a lot of help for people and communities across the state. I'm just kind of really pleased today that our revenue held up, our GDP growth held up at 2.2%, so we're able to consider trying to move forward with these. It could be that the door would have been slammed today had the forecast gone south on us. So meetings that I've had with the Speaker and with Senator Gazelka, we've been wanting to get to where we are today, where we can all pull ourselves back together and try to figure out what the path is. And I think today's forecast puts us in a position where I believe we have adequate resources to be able to really accomplish the three large pieces that are outstanding.
The interest of gender balance, Melissa, go
Just some brief comments. I'll say that I'm optimistic, and it's unique in that Senator Bach and I are working together because we'll have to get the votes in the Senate from what was before the election. So it makes it a little bit unique, but I think we're both committed to the three things that we talked about related to the bonding bill, the tax bill, and health care relief. All three of them are important. The one that really triggered that is the health care relief for people that have high premiums. It's, I talked to a lady from Baudette, Minnesota that came down and just said, these are unaffordable rates. I have no access, and so we're all committed. The last thing that hasn't been mentioned is we hope to lay out some direction for reform that we can point Commerce Department towards, that we can do even before January 1. But even if it's after January 1, we are all committed to working on that, the governor, the House, and the Senate.
Minnesotans certainly deserve relief on the healthcare premiums, and there's no reason that we shouldn't be able to do that. The real test of whether we have a meeting of the minds on all three components to have a special session will be when the documents are written, and we can all take a look at them and find out whether the meeting of the minds that that people conceptually have really work out when they put pen to paper. So we'll be looking forward to seeing the bills and to having the whole state of Minnesota see the bills well in advance of when we would come in and vote on them.
Questions?
Can you talk about what the healthcare deal might look like?
Well, the basis for it would be the premium rebate that I proposed now 36 days ago, and we've revised the legislation. We're going to provide that to the legislators by the end of today. And then the Speaker, Senator Benson in particular, stressed the desire to have something to focus on access, continuity of care for people who have medical conditions now and are otherwise going to be excluded from their doctors, other care providers. So the way things stand, I'm fully supportive of that. We need to see if we can get the other necessary parties, starting with the health plans, to go along with that, but if we can include that. Senator Benson mentioned getting the Department of Commerce to do some actuarial studies before the beginning of the next session, get it started as soon as possible, and put that into statute so that that becomes a requirement, and that's fine too. And beyond that, I mean, personally say that I think anything else is going to be probably better wait till January. I mean, everybody will be back, and most people will be back in January. The House and Senate will be able to have a Republican majority. So, in terms of what they want to do for reform, is something that they certainly have the prerogative to take up starting January 3rd. And I think it will be difficult for us to make some of the decisions until we know better what's going to happen in Washington. But so that would be my view. If we're going to try to do something without hearings, without giving most members a chance to really participate in the discussion, that we limit it to those features.
Is there anything in what you're talking about to help those people in the counties that just have Blue Plus available, expensive and restrictive, that would help them in 17?
Well, we've been working with Medica to provide flexibility on their caps for those 5 counties, and thus far they have provided that. So no one's been excluded from coverage in that situation as yet.
Other counties that just have Blue Plus right now, I don't know how many, maybe some of you know, but that's the only option they have, is that HMO that they say they may have to drive 60 miles to a doctor, or it's a lot more expensive. Is there anything in your talks that would help those people?
Well, the continuity of care, again, the speaker speak better than I, because he's been championing this, in fairness, and you want to talk about it?
Sure, I can. This has been a big deal for us, and I've been saying this right along. It isn't just the cost, but it's also the access for folks, and we want to make sure that people can get to the doctor that they want to, and if they've been in a cancer treatment somewhere, that they don't have to switch that mid-treatment and move to a different doctor or provider. It's difficult given where we are, and we keep throwing out ideas, but unfortunately with the timelines and all of this happening on January 1st, it's difficult to make changes to that now. and you know, I hope that it's not too late. And if we don't get something agreed to on access or some of the reforms that we think it's necessary to put in place as soon as possible to help us solve this problem long term, that we at least do the cost part of it, the relief part of it for folks and help them. And remember, there's only 12 days between when we're talking about having a special session and when we start our regular session. But this problem is such a serious problem, and the healthcare people, the people who are so passionate about these issues, are telling us that even that 12 days makes a difference when you're talking about trying to make sure you've done everything you can to be ready for the next round of bidding and getting the reforms we need in place so that we have a stable marketplace on January 1st of 2018. So I think what we have kind of agreed to is that we would proceed with just the premium relief if we can't get a solution that is workable on the access or on the reform side. But we want everyone to keep working as diligently as they can to try to get some resolution on those. And obviously the plans are part of that as well. We need them to be at the table helping us find something that's going to help Minnesotans as well. So.
You mentioned 12 days before session, what's the date?
Sure. So we did talk about that briefly. I think, and I don't want to speak for everybody, but I think the date that we talked about, if we do a special session, would likely be on December 20th. Could be give or take one day, but that's kind of what we're looking at. We would like to have our folks together right away next week, trying to figure out language, and we've set a goal that we want to have language drafted and done and able to be reviewed by everyone prior to the Friday before that session. So I think that's the 16th of December. So those are the dates that we're looking at.
What about the logistics of a special session?
You're probably talking about the Capitol, right? I don't know, and maybe the governor can chime in. It's the Department of Admin has been working really hard to get the Capitol done and ready. They're assuring us that we'll be able to use it right away on January 3rd when our session starts. I don't think they have a certificate of occupancy prior to January 1st. I don't know if there's any flex or a temporary certificate. They've told us the problem may be that they don't have the water turned on in the building yet, so there's no plumbing and those sorts of things, which are certainly necessary. If we need to, we can certainly use a temporary chamber, as we did a year ago over in the state office building, and I think there's chambers available, temporary chambers potentially available in the Senate building as well.
How would you invite would this deal, if it comes together, take out the forecast that we just learned about a few hours ago?
Well, the premium reduction is $300 million approximately. The tax bill, it needs to be repriced by the Department of Revenue based on this forecast, but you know, my concern and others is the tails going out 18, 19, and even more 2021. So those are the costs that will increase the way the bill is configured, and that will be necessary to look at for making at least for me, making a final decision. The bonding bill, we talked about removing the cash from the bonding bill. I don't think we have sufficient surplus to fund the health care relief and the tax bill and $300 million in cash for bonding. But that's all subject to negotiation. But so that represents my view, not necessarily consensus at this point.
Agreement on whether or not to use the surplus dollars or healthcare access fund dollars for the discount or the rebate for health insurance.
All others speak for themselves who have decided preferences. I said I wasn't going to agree to anything until I could take that back and give some thought, at least over the weekend. But you have some strong views on that.
Yeah, you know, obviously, and I've been very vocal about this, I think it makes more sense to use the healthcare access fund money to pay for that. I think it's great that we all agree that we need to provide some relief. As much as we don't like the problem, we need to all be part of the solution and giving these people some relief. So we prefer using the healthcare access fund as the funding source, or I do. I think my caucus does. But I think, like I said, it's difficult because we've only had a couple of hours to, be able to absorb the forecast numbers this morning. So we need to kind of see how all of this fits in. My goal was to try to get us back to as close as we could to the end of last session. The forecast numbers actually, you can set the table almost the same way that we left last session. So if we could make the bonding bill and the tax bill work at the end of last session and make that all fit together, we should be able to do it now again. And that's why I'm optimistic that we can get something done.
Speaker, I think you said earlier today that something about maybe a pared down bonding bill. Were you talking about leaving the cash out, or were you thinking about?
It was the cash that what the governor's saying. I think we would be open to that. What we did to make room in the bonding bill was moved some of the transportation projects into trunk highway bonding. And then we put some of the governor's projects into cash. So if one of those things that needs to be negotiated is if we move the cash from the bill, how do we fit those projects in, or how do we prioritize what to fit into a bonding bill? So those things need to be negotiated. I don't want to talk too much about that because we haven't all made the decisions about that. We are willing to take the cash out of the bonding bill, and I think that would help us be in a better position when we get into budgeting next year.
Is there a range of how much money is being talked about, discussed now for special session, including all three items?
Well, part of what we need to do is look at all that and what impact it has on the tails based on the forecast this morning. That obviously the tax bill, as we're talking, would look very much the way that it does right now. The bonding bill would also look very much the way that it does right now, potentially without the $300 million cash. So you can kind of recreate the puzzle that we had at the end of last session based on what I just told you.
My recollection on the tax bill is that the tails were significant on that.
Well, I wanted to say they were 570 or 580 million, but they might be closer to 600 million, something like that in the
Wouldn't that
tails.
eat up almost all the forecasts that we just
Well,
heard about today?
if after today's forecast we have the same amount of money we had before today's forecast, and we were going to do this bill at the end of last session, the table's still set the same way it was. So we still do have the opportunity to do it.
I would just add, my own view is, and I propose that the healthcare relief come from the $334 million that has just been added, I guess, hours ago to the budgeted reserve. I think we're talking about an emergency situation. That's what this emergency was. That's what this situation is, emergency for a lot of people in Minnesota. So that's still under discussion.
Is there a reason why you'd want to do the tax bill and bonding bill now? Obviously, you're coming back to session, as you noted, in about a month.
Can you repeat that?
Is there a reason why you'd want to do, why there's the tax bill and the bonding bill are kind of on the same plane as the emergency health care relief?
Well, and maybe Senator Bach would want to speak to this too. I think, we worked really hard last year to get to agreement on those two bills, and while we didn't eventually get them completely agreed to and passed, it took a lot of work. And if you look at the tax bill, it had, I think, 89% of the legislators voted for it. We had a bonding bill that passed out of the House with, I think, 91 votes, if I remember right, something like that. There was pretty good consensus on support for those bills. I mentioned earlier in the press conference that the tax bill really has some real tax relief in it for the same people who are impacted by the increases in the premiums by farmers and small business owners. There's some real tax relief in that bill for those people. So they really kind of do fit together. And I think I look at it as we still have two pieces of unfinished business from last year, and I've actually been an advocate for having a special session, including those two pieces, because I want to get last year's business wrapped up so we can start on January 3rd when we come in for our next session with a little different looking legislature and start with a clean slate. We don't have to finish up last year's business, and I think those bills were broadly supported, and I think Minnesotans also broadly supported them. So. And maybe Tom wants to talk about that too, but I think for the two of us, and we've talked about it somewhat, I think it's important to get that what we think is unfinished business done.
Well, kind of 2 points, I guess. There's a lot of members of the Senate who aren't going to be here on January 3rd. And they have provisions included in the tax bill or in the bonding bill that are important to their communities that they worked very hard on. And I think we owe it to them to close the loop for them. as they move off into retirement or other careers or whatever they're going to do, in all fairness to them. And that's really, those provisions are in both bills. On the bonding bill, let me just say, they're very hard to pass, and everybody in this room knows that. Getting a 60% majority is very difficult, especially difficult in a budget year. So I do think that if we don't get this $1 billion of construction out the door, I think it's pretty unlikely that in a budget year, somehow we're going to put together a $1 billion bonding bill at the end of session. Very unlikely, based on my experience here. So what that means to me is we're going to wait, all these projects are going to wait now until 2018 in May before they get considered. Construction inflation is going to require all of them to be more expensive, and we're not going to come back. I would vote for it, but I think my two leaders behind me probably aren't going to come back with a $2 billion bill in 2018. It would be my guess. I'd be happy to support that, but
Safe.
so what ends up happening is that there's kind of this arbitrary cap of $1 billion, and it's totally arbitrary, but it is what it is. And so what ends up happening if the bonding bill waits till 18 is we get $1 billion behind in investment in deteriorating infrastructure all over our state. It costs more, and we fall further behind. So, and the construction economy can certainly use the stimulus that bonding creates. Construction is a big piece of our GDP. So I think there's a lot of reasons to do it, and just kind of personally, for the people who aren't coming back or are surprised by it, who work very, very hard on some of those provisions, as the leader, I'd like to be able to help close the loop for them as they move on to a different chapter in life.
Any other questions?
Anything else? Very good. Thank you all.
Thank you.